Welcome to episode 4 of Tracing the Rails. You may wonder why I'm standing in the middle of a 1970s housing estate with no signs of a railway station, but this used to be the middle of a bustling railway station.
Never mind wondering why we're in the middle of a housing estate, wondering who this is. I'm Stephen Cranford. Welcome to the next instalment of Tracing the Rails. I'm delighted to be joined by Chris Bedford, otherwise known as Dumpman, a leading expert in disused railways. And Chris will be joining me here in Henfield as we explore this portion of the journey. So join us for Tracing the Rails. And Chris, can I have my waistcoat back?
Winding through the heart of Sussex. What history unveils, exploring whispers, tales of steel, echoes of the past, tracing the rail.
In this series, we trace the rails of a lost railway on England's south coast, the Steyning Line. Beginning in Shoreham by sea, we journey north, uncovering hidden clues of its past. We explore the remains of each station, revealing the line's social and practical history. Along the way, we show you what clues to look for and help to understand what these remnants mean and how they were used in context. Our adventure ends in Horsham, completing the story of this once magical, now ever-vanishing line. We begin this episode by picking up where we left off at Stretham Bridge. Soon after, we reflect on how Stretham Farm and estate have shaped the local landscape. Our walk continues gently along the route towards Henfield, pausing here and there to highlight hidden relics and forgotten treasures. We then showcase the first of 2 towering arches in detail and wander past the echoes of long-lost farms that were once an essential part of this region's history. A short distance later, we arrive at the second impressive arch, a bit trickier to find, and talk about the impact of Stretham Farm and estate on the area. After a healthy walk, we arrive at the Cabin Cafe to stop for an Eccles cake. Opposite the cafe, Mike visits the remnants of some ancient sand pits and makes the most amazing discovery. We take a leisurely walk along the line towards Henfield, pointing out remnants and treasures along the way. As we arrive in Henfield, Mike examines the old steam mill at the start of the railway station, while I look into the now demolished bridge. Then we explore what little that remains of Henfield Station and meet up with an old friend. Together we explore the shops that used to be in the area and stop to interview a dog. We move up the line to the upper bridge, now buried, and we sadly part with our guest at the old railway inn. We briefly detour away from our route to visit the historic George Inn, while Mike stops by a nearby flower nursery. Everything connecting in its own time, all will be revealed. Returning to our path, we head for a small lake beside Great Betley Farm Hotel, curious about what secrets might be hidden there. Soon after, we cross Betley Bridge, our last river crossing. Maybe even catching sight of another pillbox along the way. Around here, we bump into an intriguing special guest, walking along this lost railway of Britain. Heading into Partridge Green, we stroll through the industrial estate, now occupying the site of the vanished Partridge Green station, where only the echoes of social history linger.
The next station is...
And there are hardly any remnants to show. We do discover some houses on the line bearing a few clues to its former existence. At last, after one final push, our journey concludes at the rail bridge spanning Needs Hill, marking the end of our nostalgic walk. Welcome back to Tracing the Rails. I'm here at Stretham Bridge, the second river crossing where the railway line went over the river Ada. In the last episode, this is where we finished, but I've come back this time in the beautiful spring weather to look at this magnificent bridge from the other side. Now, before the railways were here, goods were transported around on this river by barge. And there would have been a towpath along here that would have pulled the barges up and down the river. And what's interesting is you can see here that between the pillar of the bridge on this side, there's quite a gap where the horses would have been able to move, whereas on the other side, you can see that those pillars actually go right up to the edge of the water. The other thing we were talking about in the last episode was the mysterious Fetham Station. If you recall, this was a phantom or ghost station that was allegedly put down on maps, but there was no physical trace of it ever existing. Now, as we've seen in the series so far, the Steyning Line was only ever served by steam or diesel trains. There was no electrical power to the line at all, although it was discussed. If you did electrify a line, you would have to get the electricity from the grid to the track. And in order to do that, you would have to build substations. These are those little transformer units that you see fenced off at the side of the railway line. If you look at the old maps, it's highly likely that there could have been a Fetham or Stretham substation right next to the track. And on the mapping and on the planning, this may have been written down as Fetham Station. Let's now take a look at the map that showed the position of this fabled Fetham Station and overlay onto it a photograph that was taken by the RAF at the time. What you'll notice is at the side of the track there's a very large area that's been cleared for some mysterious reason. This is right by the buried bridge that we showed you in a previous episode, and that bridge is also near the power lines. So, could it be that this location was intended to be one of the substations that would have taken power from the grid and sent it onto the rails? One of the things that we love during the making of Tracing the Rails is the interaction with social media, in particular Facebook groups. And on one such Facebook group we were talking about this mysterious Fetham Station that appeared in the previous episode, and there was one name that caught our attention because this individual had come up with a lot of research and theories into Fetham itself, and that name is Sophie Watts, and I'm rather delighted that Sophie joins us now. Hello, Sophie, or at least I hope you're Sophie.
I sure am. Nice to meet you.
Lovely to meet you. Now, Sophie, if you don't mind me asking,
Of course.
when it comes to enthusiasm for disused railway lines, most people are a lot older than you, and also, dare I say it, they tend to be more boys than girls.
They do?
What is your particular interest in disused railway lines, such as this one?
That's a very interesting question, Stephen. Well, I think that they hold a heck of a lot of history in what to everyone else, without knowing the history, may just be deemed as, a cycle path.
Mm-hmm. Now, Fetham Station, your comments on this on Facebook caught our eye. Tell me what you think about Fetham Station.
We do know that there were pathways leading up to this line, so we know there was a halt on this line before. That wasn't official, which people did use. However, was there one here or was there not? That's the question. There's no strong evidence to actually say whether yes there was or no there wasn't.
Well, Sophie, we might have a little surprise for you.
Ooh.
And in order to show you, we need to take a delve into the bushes. Now, Sophie, this is what I wanted to show you.
Oh.
Down this embankment are some rather flaky looking concrete steps. Now, these lead from the railway line down to a little gate over a brook, and that is Stretham Farm.
Aha.
So, for all the investigation we've been doing, or you've been doing, why would there be a path, do you think, from the farm up to what was the railway line?
From all that we could probably surmise, with the workings on the farm being with the need for transportation in those days, we got to think that they had the Steyning Farmers Market just down line as well.
Yeah. So maybe this was one of those request stop halts.
Well, it
So
could be. It
could
may not be.
Fetham Station have been just here?
It could well have been, but I think we need stronger evidence in order to prove this.
However, it is a little bit of fun, and we can all hypothesise about this, can't we?
Absolutely.
Anyway, we'll never know. Nice to meet you, Sophie.
And you as well.
Off we go. So this is the entrance to Stretham Farm, and right over there beyond those trees you can just about see Stretham Manor. Now, it might not look like much today, but back in its day Stretham Manor was a really important part of the parish of Henfield. It was actually a local courthouse, and dignitaries such as bishops used to come here. But then, in the middle of the Victorian era, along came the railways. And the railway line sliced its way right through the middle of the Stretham estate. There are still some lingering clues about the old line, such as this concrete post. I know we've seen many of them along our journey, but let's cross over the tracks and see what's the other side. Emerging from the farm today onto the Downslink, it's actually rather convenient for them because they can drive out and head north towards Henfield or south towards Steyning. Prior to the railways, they could also do a similar thing because this was an old track that would have taken them to the next village. But of course then, in the 1860s, BAM! Here came the railway, and it literally sliced their estate in half. So coming out of the farm, their only option would have been to cross the track, dodging the trains, to get to the other side of the estate. Now, there used to be buildings on this side. They have long gone, and when we look at some old maps, we know that there used to be a moat that ran around the perimeter of this estate. And in fact, if you look at some aerial photographs, you can still make out where that moat used to be. The name Stretham comes from two Saxon words, stret and ham, meaning street and dwelling. And in fact, this whole route used to be an old Roman road. It was called the Old Roman Green Sands Way. So there's an awful lot of history lurking around in this area. If you're planning to walk along this route following the path that I'm taking, there are certain things to look out for that you might unwittingly miss, and I'm about to point out one of them to you. I'm now about 70 metres south of a railway bridge, and on the floor, in the ground, is this rather unusual concrete cross. Now, there's every chance you would have probably walked straight past this, but in actual fact, it is a buried monument stone or Hallard stone. Do you remember in a previous episode we explained what these are for? They're like a little marker point that would be used to check the position and the angle of the track to make sure that they hadn't moved. Well, this one is still in place, and if you want to find it, why don't I give you the what 3 words coordinates? So if I get the app going on my phone, it's telling me that we are at Drifters Dirt Unroll. So type those coordinates in and it will send you to this buried stone. Less than a minute's walk north of that monument stone is the next thing to look out for on the railway line. This magnificent brick tunnel that takes you underneath the track. Now, there are a couple of things I want to point out to you about this bridge. The first one is that there is a very clear dividing line that runs all the way up, around the top and down the other side, with a gap big enough to actually stick your hand in. This, to me, makes it look like one part of the bridge was built separately to the other, and there is a reason for this. In 1866, when the line opened, perhaps they didn't have the confidence that the line would be popular enough, so they only built it as a single track, hence a bridge wide enough just for one line. But about 30 years later, the popularity kind of warranted making it a double track, and consequently this single bridge wouldn't have done the job. So they built phase 2, which perhaps is this half here. And rather than interrupting or disturbing this bridge, they just built it alongside. That's why they're not quite lined up and there's a distinct gap in the brickwork. But the other thing that I would like to point out to you is that this bridge is very high indeed. In fact, we believe it's the highest tunnel on the line. Now, why is that? This was built for farm machinery to be moved from one side to the other underneath the railway line. And of course, in the 1860s, we're not talking tractors, we're talking horses and carts. And any farm machinery would have had to be loaded on the back of that cart. So this was made high enough so that all of that could clear the tunnel to get from one side to the other. This is steeper than it looks, but if you can make your way down there, it's certainly worth a look. Now, do you remember in Steyning, I pointed out that station wall that had a very decorative wall tie? Well, lo and behold, here is another one, a beautiful example, doing its job after 160 odd years at the end of this wall. Sadly, however, this old wall is not doing so well. It's developing this enormous crack, which local people tell me is getting worse year by year. So I suspect at some point they may have to demolish it. As we continue north along the line towards Berrett's Farm, the railway passed a floodplain known locally as the Brooks, and near to the Cabin Cafe there is the second of these two brick archways. Now the first one, as you've seen, is quite easy to spot, but the second one we kept on missing. So we've done the same trick for you that we did in an earlier episode. We've looked on an Ordnance Survey map and converted the 6-figure grid reference into 3 words for the What 3 Words app. So if you have that on your phone, type in flexibly snowballs complain, and it will send you, it's about 10 meters ahead of me, so we are close. This is the sign you need to look out for. The bridge parapets are actually further down here, but look out for this scaffolding with barbed wire. That is where the bridge is, but to see it, I've got to go the long way round. I've made my way down this little public footpath to see this. Oh my goodness. Now, I've been along the path on the Downslink countless times. I never knew that this was here, and we missed it on our recce's 2, 3, 4 times, because this beautiful bridge is tucked away from the Downslink, so many people probably have no idea that it's here. Now, these two bridges are known for their very high arches, like we saw in the other one, so that they could get tall agricultural machinery through. And these two arches were very important to the 3 local farms. That's Brookside, Rye and Pokerlee. They allowed the staff, the animals and the machinery to get from one side of the railway line to another. This one, though, is in so much better condition than the other one. For a start, there's no graffiti on it. But actually, looking at this brickwork, it's all in much better condition. And look at all that wonderful work. And listen to that echo. In fact, that reminds me of a lovely story that Alan Barwick, who's the curator of Henfield Museum, told me. He said when he was a little boy, he used to play down here, and whenever they heard a train coming, they would run to these bridges and listen to the thundering noise of the trains running overhead. And with this echo, it must have been deafening, but great fun for an 11-year-old boy. So let's take a look out here. These two wonderful bridges serve Dagbrook Lane and Brookside Lane. And one of them is still in use today as a footpath, so it's well worth exploring, although it is a little bit overgrown, as you can see. But wow, look at that. That parapet is actually still there, but you just simply can't see it from the path. So this is one diversion that is absolutely worth taking. During World War II, an evacuee called Joan Tarling lived and worked at Brookside Farm. One of her duties was to move cattle from one side of the farm to the other underneath the railway line through this tunnel. She remembers hearing stories about the time when the railway was introduced and the farm actually had to be relocated. This disrupted the farm, and it was never quite the same since that point. Pokerlee Farm nearby did even worse. In fact, the introduction of the railways caused a catastrophic loss of trade. And in the years after the railway was introduced, it actually closed. If we look back at the old tithe deeds between the wars, that's when the farm disappeared completely. Pokerlee used to be part of the Stretham Manor estate, and one of the more unusual customs is that they had to have a bull, a boar and a horse available for the people of the manor to use at any time. One of those very strange 17th century customs. If you're walking the Downslink, there's a good possibility that you might stop off here at the Cabin Cafe, which is just south of Henfield. After all, they do a mean Eccles cake, which I shall enjoy later. There's also another thing you might want to look out for here on the path just outside the cafe, because that is the old track bed of the Steyning Line. Do you remember in a previous episode I was telling you, as I was walking alongside the River Ada north of Shoreham, that they used to use pebbles from the beach mixed in with a proper aggregate when they were laying the railway line. Now, they shouldn't really have done this. It was one of their methods that they used to save a little bit of money. Quite a few people have reported finding pebbles from the beach up here in Henfield, miles from the sea, and that is the reason why. So if you do come here, do look out for them. Another different type of landscape that is in the area is just behind those trees over there, because there is, or was, a sand quarry there, and it had its own special railway that had a connection to the Henfield Station. We'll send Mike there later to find out more. The fact that I'm between Henfield and Steyning now is quite relevant because historically those two towns actually had some rivalry, and the introduction of the railway line actually made this worse. Henfield, being nearer to London, considered themselves more important, and they were worried that when the railway line came along, Steyning would eclipse them. This is because Steyning was the major town along the route. In fact, the very railway line is named after Steyning and not after Henfield. To make it worse, in some of the early drafts when they were considering the route of the railway line, Henfield was missed off altogether. To find examples of this resentment is quite tricky because Henfield never had its own publication, but little clues are available in newspapers such as the West Sussex County Times, which started in 1853, or the Sussex County Magazine, which started in 1927. Commentary from Henfield was often tongue-in-cheek directed at Steyning, and one such example was written by the editor of the West Sussex County Times. He wrote, "Steyning Station, soon to be the finest in Sussex, if only to house the egos of the residents." That was from the West Sussex Gazette, published on the 31st of January 1861. The reply came in form of a poem called The Lament of Henfield. It was about the frustration that Henfield felt about their position along the railway line. But these tensions didn't restrict themselves to just matters of the trains. It also spilt over into sport. In 1860, as tensions between the two towns were simmering, a football match was organised that would take place in a field roughly halfway between the two towns. Rumour has it that there were stakes added, that the winners would be taken home by cart and the losers would have to walk. The result? Steyning 3, Henfield 1. The Henfield residents were seen trudging home, much to the delight of their rivals, and this football match became known as the Great Railway Football Match, showing the frustration that existed between the two towns. Now, this rivalry didn't just go in one direction, and sometimes Henfield were victorious. Henfield Museum have got a photograph of a cricket match that took place on Henfield Common in 1864, where Henfield beat Steyning by 8 wickets. Even today, the Steyning Athletic Club and the Henfield Joggers sometimes compete in a race along the Downslink, following the path of the old railway line, unwittingly rekindling the rivalry that their ancestors once had.
So this is Neptown, an area of Henfield that's still, well, on the map as Neptown, even though there's no signpost saying welcome to Neptown. The name comes from the Old English nape, which means up, high or new. We think this was due to the early settlers having a real preference for being, well, on high, with a great view of well-drained areas. So for centuries, this area was not only valued for its position, but for its natural resources. In the 16th, 17th century, a mill was built up here, known as Neptown Mill, or the Old Windmill. And this gave a lot of long service to the town. It was eventually replaced in the 1820s by another mill built on Henfield Common. The old mill sadly collapsed in a storm in 1908. Now, if you do want to come up to Neptown and have a look, we've got a lot of these fantastic boards dotted around the place that tells you a lot more about the history.
On this historical map of Henfield, from the time when our Steyning Line was active and the sand pits were operational, you can clearly see the area marked as Neptown. Shifting slightly westwards, we come to the windmill we discussed earlier, and a little further west still lie the sand pits I'm about to show you. If you follow the tramway leading from the sand pits and continue on westwards, it eventually connects with the Steyning Line, now of course the Downslink. But what exactly was the tramway, and how does it relate to our railway? To find out more, I've been fortunate enough to gain access to a private garden, one that many years ago was part of those very sand pits.
By the time the sails of the windmills stopped turning, a new industry emerged from their shadows: sand extraction. Now, sand had been quarried in small quantities in Henfield for many centuries. But it was in the 1870s that local builder Philip Hedgecock decided to take things a bit bigger. He started a commercial sand pit here in Henfield that was so successful that by the 1890s he had to mechanise it. He did this with the aid of a naturally occurring valley and incline. Trams ran on narrow gauge rails pulled by counterweighted ropes to get the sand up and down to the main line. That incline and valley are here. I know what you're thinking, this doesn't look like very much, but this place, believe it or not, was actually critical to the operation of the sand pits. Let me put you in mind of where we are. So we're close to Berrett's Crossing. Over there was the Steyning to Horsham line. So Steyning is that way, Henfield and Horsham that way. On this raised part here was a sidings. Now, this ended in a buffer stop probably about 20 metres down that way. And above me, another embankment, well, that is where the sand pit tramway ran. Trucks would be shunted up this siding, and then on a sort of wooden platform above the top, was where the tramway ran. The trucks would run onto that and then be hand-tipped into the waiting trucks beneath. Now, the trucks would have a tarpaulin to cover them, so that they weren't just sitting out open to the elements, etc. We do know it took about a day to fill 2 of these moderate-sized trucks on the line. Now, the reason this was crucial, it's all well and good having a sand pit excavation, but it's no use if you can't sell that sand on to customers. Lorries weren't particularly prevalent. The only real way they had of getting the sand out to the customers was via the railway. Did this extremely well, very efficiently, and the sand ended up further down the line at Beeding Sidings, for instance, where the cement works used it to make their product. It was also used extensively in Brighton to help expand the city in the late 19th and early 20th century. Even though it's just a few different tiers of dirt and scrap and trees, this was crucial to Henfield's economy. In 1905, Brighton Corporation formalised a long-term lease with the sandpit to ensure supply chain reliability. A gentleman by the name of William or Bill Carter and his wife Alice were moved up to Henfield to manage the sandpit. Bill had been a former stationary engine driver whilst in Brighton and probably found managing the little tramway system up here no problem at all. They lived at Old Mill Cottage or Old Mill House, which became a sort of informal headquarters for the sandpit. I'm trying not to step on any of the plants, but look at this. Oh, You know, it's wonderful exploring a house built on a sand pit. We've got traces of actual sand. So this is what was being quarried here in the sand pit, coming through this embankment. Now, as workers dug into this sand, it betrayed millennia of human activity. They found flint axe heads from the Mesolithic period, and also fragments of Roman pottery from settlers who would have moved to these parts at the times when they had the great forest of Anderida stretching all the way up to Londinium. We're incredibly lucky with Tracing the Rails that so many people have become a part of this project. So many people have got on board through our social media sites and said, yes, absolutely, you can have access to what is effectively private land. Today is no exception in Henfield. We are incredibly grateful to Ginny and Robin for allowing us access to their garden, which used to be one of the sand quarries. In their garden, they had a very unusual table, this. And they said to us when we arrived, we've no idea what it is. Can you help? We also discovered this part down here as well. Now, I believe these two live together. I think this is a turntable from the original sand quarry. As we already said, this was where the sand was extracted, this was where the tramway ran, so it seems only fair to surmise this is actually part of it. I think this sits on the top, you turn it, and it's used to make the tram carts go down a different track. Shall we test that theory? Robin, do you want to give me a hand to lift this onto the base here, and we'll see if it fits, if you could.
Okay.
Yeah. Oh, it's quite heavy, isn't it? It's quite a chunk. So that should, which fingers? Perfect. It fits. So, I think if you pull that over, it locks it in place. You would run your cart on these rails onto this dais. Remove that. Turn it round. Lock it back in place again, and now your cart has turned 90 degrees in a few seconds without the need for long curves, electronic turntables or other ways of turning your trucks around. Absolute genius piece of kit, and what an amazing find. By the 1930s, the sand pits in Henfield had given just about all they had to give. There was a last excavation between 1935 and 1938 further east over by Windmill Lane, but after which the sand pits were laid empty. They were used for market gardening, sawmilling, even chicken farming. By the time the railway closed in the 1960s, some had even been converted to allotments. The latter phases of the sand quarrying, though, would have been heavily mechanised, showing just how far we'd come from the early days of men with big shovels.
As I head to Henfield, you can certainly see that this was an old railway line. Just look at that straight trajectory. Now, it's worth bearing in mind that Henfield Station was a key stop on the Steyning Line. Situated around 11 miles south of Horsham, it handled a variety of goods, including milk churns heading their way up to London markets. And during World War II, it transported sugar beet to aid the war effort. The station's goods yard also had a variety of things, from cattle pens, loading docks and sidings, which all played an important part in the village's economy. At last, after a fairly lengthy walk, we are heading into Henfield. And what's caught my eye is this sign, "Caution, road ahead." Now, looking ahead, the path here takes a very distinct decline as it heads towards the road, and that sign is to warn cyclists that they need to stop at the bottom. But what's interesting is that on TV you can't quite see the extent of the gradient here, because the path as it is today goes downhill. But in the time of the railway, there was actually an embankment and a bridge here that took the trains into Henfield Station. And the height of the railway line is roughly where that fence is over there. Now this is a gradient map of the entire Steyning Line. As you can see, there are a variety of numbers that show the hills going up or down along the line. The numbers mean how many metres or feet you were going along to go up or down one. But in the instance of Henfield, 97 and 100, it meant for a 97 feet you were going along, you went up one. And this is pretty steep. As I've said many times on this series, railway lines don't like corners and they don't like hills, because of course the terrain that the railway took isn't flat. So any train coming into Henfield would have had to have an enormous head of steam and get a really good run up as it made its way into the station. Let's head into Henfield and have a poke around. Henfield wasn't all about industry, it was also famous for its market gardens. Growers would produce fruit, vegetables and flowers that were sent up to the London markets by train. Do you remember how in Bramber they used to produce lavender? Well, Henfield is famous for its Henfield violets. That building over there is the old steam mill, built in 1872. We sent Mike to take a look.
Now, if you were on the train from Shoreham going towards Horsham, when you got into Henfield, if you looked out the right window, you'd see this fantastic building behind me. This is one of two steam mills that Henfield boasted at the time of the railway. And the railway was absolutely crucial to the operation of these businesses because it brought in coal. Of course, these two mills weren't the only heavy users of coal in Henfield. The Henfield Gas and Coke Company was formed in 1864 and it continued producing gas until, well, about the late 1950s, after which time the gas was piped in from Sussex. That site was demolished in the late 1960s. Now, whether or not the mills collected the coal from the goods yard or it was delivered by a coal merchant, we're not sure, and it doesn't really matter. Without the railway, these businesses wouldn't have been here. Now, this particular mill was built around about the same time as the railway was. We often hear about how new technology overrides old technology and progress and onwards and upwards. This was literally put out of business in around about 1900 by a technology that was hundreds of years old. The windmill on the top of the hill. Henfield became known for its industry, for its vegetables, for potatoes. Milk was supplied up and down the line. There were even violets grown in a little cottage industry up the road. And all this went from this little town to Brighton, to London and the world.
And this is where that bridge would have taken the line over the road. Rather conveniently, there's a natural dip in this road, so this is actually a perfect position for that enormous bridge that would have been right up at the height of these rooftops. It was a very wide bridge with 3 tracks that end, expanding to 4 tracks as it headed towards the platforms. Here are some photos that were taken around the time that the bridge was demolished. walked down the hill to the other end of the bridge, and now I'm walking up the hill to where Henfield Station used to be. Of course, it's long gone, largely down to this chap, Beechings. Does that name seem familiar? Dr. Beeching, of course, one of the big names that was in association with the closure of the railways in the 1960s. So this little cul-de-sac, this little mini housing estate, is actually the position of the old Henfield railway station. And apart from the odd clue like that name, you really wouldn't have any idea at all. I'm just trying to get a little look at the lay of the land here to see where it could have been. The railway would have arrived via that big bridge just where these houses are, and it would have been several tracks wide, and there were a lot of sidings and railway related buildings in the area. In fact, someone along here reportedly found coal in their back garden. Now for this next section, I'm going to enlist the help of one of the top experts in disused railways, so I hope he's in. I'm just going to go and tap on his door. So here we are.
Come on in, Steve.
Thank you. Oh, there was one thing you mentioned to me just earlier about your loo.
You must see.
Can I have a look?
Of course you can.
Oh, look at this. I remember the old avocado toilet suite, but this is a picture of Henfield Station. Would it be actually my view when the railway was still here, about where I am?
Absolutely. If you're standing there at the toilet, that's the view you would have had.
That's amazing, isn't it? And a little bit of model railway, for which I highly approve. That's an old Triang 00 from years ago. What's the story behind that?
Well, that was when we moved into the house in October last year. We found an old railway set, model railway in the loft, and we thought we'd keep a little bit just as a token, you know.
And then this side, spotted the British Railways mirror, British Rail mirror. And is that an ashtray?
That is an ashtray.
Gosh, I remember seeing those underneath the windows
That's
by those
right.
little tiny sort of table things they used to have.
You need to be of a certain age to remember the British Rail ashtray.
Yes.
I do.
Well, thankfully you can't smoke on trains anymore. Okay, so let's move through. So, as this was the old railway, where would we be now? Is this...
We're on the southbound platform.
Okay.
Really.
So trains for Shoreham that way.
That's right.
Gosh.
And then the actual course of the track right the way through the middle of the house, in between the living and dining area, and then out the back we've got the northbound platform. Nothing to suggest, anymore. But
no. So for someone like you with such a massive interest in railways, that must be quite cool, really.
Oh, it's fantastic. It's great, yeah.
And you owning this house, was that by design or just chance?
No, it's chance.
Really?
Complete chance. We were desperate to move somewhere and it turned up. Yeah.
That's really good.
A lot of people ask, they say, is this, you must have chosen this house on that basis. Not a bit of it.
Now, another thing I'm clocking, I know you have a sort of an image. Motorhead, you got your Motorhead t-shirt on today.
Always.
And a Motorhead throw. Why Motorhead?
Best band that there ever was. Simply that.
Simple answer for a simple question. Excellent. So as we move through your lounge then, crossing the track, just check for trains.
We're crossing the track right now.
And then roughly where your kitchen is, this is the Horsham bound side.
That's right. So we'll be onto the northbound platform just as we step out the back.
Do you know, you would have no idea, would you?
Nothing.
Not a clue. It's quite sad, really, isn't it, that there's not much. However, outside, I can see a few bits of memorabilia.
We've got a few trinkets, yeah.
Oh,
come and have a look.
Yeah. Excellent. Oh, it's nice to actually have some sunshine.
Isn't it fantastic?
Now, the first thing I noticed about the layout of your garden is this embankment.
Yes.
That presumably is how the railway was.
Yeah, this is railway cutting. We're actually on pretty much platform level right here.
Gosh. So the houses right at the back, those are original sort of 30s or something.
That's right, they were there.
And then these were all built on the path of the old railway line.
Yeah.
Of course, other things that I can see here, you've got some little trophies, very nice little porter's trolley. Is that a railway original?
It is a railway original, yes.
Because you see cases like this on the period dramas and things, don't you?
I still use those.
You do?
Yeah.
That's your luggage. How cool.
Globetrotters.
Well,
very
it's
good.
easy to spot your luggage then on the carousel,
yes.
isn't it? And what about on here? You've got some other bits and pieces.
Trinkets.
Yeah.
So we got a piece of clinker.
Now, what's clinker?
That's a byproduct of the combustion process that produces steam from coal.
And that's a sort of a bit of burnt coal.
Yeah, yeah.
Wow. And where did you find that?
Oh, it may possibly in the garden here.
Possibly in the garden here.
Possibly.
Excellent. And a big piece of nutty
Nice
slack.
piece of coal, isn't that fantastic?
It is amazing, isn't it? If you told somebody that there was a rock that you could burn that would fire a steam-powered machine hundreds of years ago, they would think you were mad.
Yeah, it would.
Brilliant stuff. And Saxby & Farmer, 1881, I'm seeing that. That looks very heavy.
It is.
What actually is it?
It's part of an old signal box. I'd love to tell you that it's part of the signal box that was just next door, but that probably isn't the case.
No. Okay. And then next to it, you've got two
This is a
chairs.
Southern Railway rail chair from 1941,
Wow.
which may have come from the disused railway near Uckfield.
But
then
you
there's-
can't be certain.
I couldn't possibly tell you. And there's another one here, which is London Brighton South Coast Railway
Yeah.
from 1913, which could quite possibly have come from somewhere near Christ Hospital.
Allegedly.
Allegedly.
Yeah. And they are astonishingly heavy.
They're
aren't
very,
they?
very
But
heavy.
it is amazing that they are 100 years old, or this one is certainly
Yeah.
over 100 years old. They've survived really well, haven't
Yeah,
they?
they would live forever.
And the railway lines that are still here, like the Brighton line, would they still have those original shoes, or do you think they've replaced them?
They replace them.
Gosh.
Yeah.
Now, another thing that is part of your iconic... Actually, let's go back. What is it about railways that you actually like then? What made you want to do these fabulous films over the past 20 years?
Yeah, my dad got me into it, really. When we were kids in the 70s, he used to take us walking in the West Country, and you'd always end up on an old railway track, and he would explain the history of it. And at the time, it seemed extraordinary that all that work had gone into building these amazing layouts, and they'd just been ripped up in the wink of an eye.
And when did you decide that you wanted to document these, and not only document them, but share them as well?
About 20 years ago, something like that.
And what's your most sort of impressive railway, or what's the one that you've been most surprised by?
It's a tough one, you know. You fall in love with every single one for some particular reason. There are some fantastic ones over in West Sussex, Midhurst to Chichester line.
Yeah.
Some of the tunnels through the Downs there. There's every line that you film, you fall in love with something. You know, there's something to recommend.
And for those of you who might not know Chris, there's another thing about your identity that's very iconic. And I've got a bit of a delicate question here. Can I have a look at your chopper?
Of course you can, Steve.
I see it's over there. Now, these were so iconic in the 70s, weren't they? In fact, my brother used to have one of these, and I was always rather envious. His was bright yellow. But this is quite a beast, isn't it?
It's an absolute death trap, and made in 1971, perpetually being welded back together by my chums at work, because it's built for a child, not a 15-stone adult. But it's a very comfortable bike to ride when you're filming a disused railway track. A nice armchair position, one hand on the handlebars, another one holding the camera. All of the trips I do have been done on this bike.
Wow. So this is as iconic as you.
More so.
More so. Fantastic.
If I ever do a film without the chopper, people would complain, where's the chopper? You know?
Well, I'm very grateful that you showed it to me. Oh, let's press on.
Yes, let's.
So this then, you would have no idea that this was the old railway line, would you? But
Nothing.
you brought along some rather handy photographs.
This is a cracker. This is just after the war,
Okay.
looking south.
So
and
this is where we are now, effectively.
very much, very, very close. What's hidden behind those houses was a great big red brick bridge carrying 4 lanes of line over it.
Crikey.
No sign of it left whatsoever now.
Now, you mentioned this was taken during the war. With things like blackouts, the houses there would have been here, or at least some of them, during the war, so they had to have a blackout. With the station, did they used to turn the lights off, or did they just dim them down?
Dim them down, sure.
Dim them down, crikey. And I also understand that a lot of the Henfield Railway staff actually joined the Home Guard,
Yeah, Captain Mannering.
their very own Dad's Army. Now, Henfield had quite a significant importance during the war, didn't it?
Absolutely. It was the furthest point south that you could travel without a permit. So if you wanted to go any further south, you had to have a special permit to get any closer to the coast.
Wow, so Henfield was like a border control.
Yeah.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
Let's see what else we can pinpoint.
In the rolling hills of Exmoor National Park, steam drifts once more through the trees. But this is Woody Bay Station, home of the revived Linton and Barnstaple Railway. Opened in 1898, closed in 1935, and now rising inch by inch from the ashes. Today's short 2-mile return journey offers just a glimpse of a dream to fully restore one of the world's most scenic narrow-gauge lines. The track winds past moor and meadow with views out to the North Devon coast, carried by proud steam engines in heritage carriages and run by passionate volunteers. But this is more than just a ride. It's a story of memory, dedication and community spirit, a living classroom of history. And today, we've come to meet someone very special. Not a driver, not a guard, but Henry, the last working railway collecting dog in Britain. He lives here with his owner John, keeping alive a tradition once common across the southern region, including on our own Steyning Line. That line had dogs too. One was Railway Jack, a fox terrier turned local legend who rode the rails from Lewes to London and Horsham to Henfield. Jack didn't collect donations, but he did collect hearts. He shared breakfast with managers, hopped trains, and once even turned up at a railwayman's funeral, completely uninvited of course, but somehow entirely expected. Jack was a regular at Steyning and Henfield. And in Henry perhaps a little of that old magic still remains. So we're here, on this peaceful stretch of Devon Railway, to celebrate one line whilst remembering another, and to meet a little dog keeping history alive, one wag of his tail at a time. Wonderful to meet you. I'm Mike.
Good afternoon, Mike.
And this must be...
Railway collecting dog Henry.
We're collecting dog Henry. Hello. Well, you're certainly the most beautiful of all our interviewees that we've had. So, the first question, John, is why? Why has Henry got this lovely little box on his back? Do you want to tell us a little bit more about it?
When Henry started to come up to Woody Bay with me, Mike, last August, I thought, well, he really needs a job to do. He needs something to do. And I remembered many years ago seeing London Jack in the Railway Museum at Bluebell Railway. And I thought, I'll dress him up as London Jack. So I made his collecting box. I got a saddle made for him and a coat. And here he is now with his collecting box and already a number of silver and gold medals for his collecting prowess.
Oh, that's fantastic. Well, he is very, very adorable, isn't he? I mean, I can see why he's a very popular cause to give to.
He's got the ideal temperament, and I suspect very much as the original London Jack dogs were as well. They were very, very affable and very happy to let the travelling public stroke them and make a fuss of them, as well as donating to the orphanage.
Absolutely. Now, John, you've written a book about the London travelling dogs, or was it particularly Jack you were saying?
It was the London Jacks,
London
really,
Jack.
Because this is who Henry is based on. And part of that research I uncovered that actually there were 5 generations, number 1 starting in 1895 at Waterloo, and number 5 retiring in 1930 from Waterloo. So 35 years of London Jack collecting at Waterloo Station.
That's fantastic. And they were collecting money for the Railway Orphanage Society.
Which started us as the London and South Western Railway Orphanage, but then became part of the Southern Railway Orphanage in 1923.
Oh, that's fantastic. And of course, we've heard stories as well in the sort of history press about kings and queens donating to the dogs also, wasn't it?
Yeah.
So it wasn't just the jackabout town commuter who would give money to the dogs.
No, not at all. And I'm sure the London Jacks, being a continuous part of the scene at Waterloo Station, would have attracted quite a following where when you saw London Jack you had to donate to him.
Definitely. There was another Jack, I think, as well, because we were chatting about this before on so our line, obviously the Steyning Line.
Yeah.
I don't think we had any collecting dogs, but we did have a character who was called Jack, who lived out of Lewes.
Yeah.
I think it's right.
Yeah.
So he lived in Lewes, He'd sleep overnight in Lewes and then catch the first train down to Brighton.
Yeah.
Apparently getting off at Steyning to go and get a biscuit.
Yes, I don't blame him.
Neither do I.
Yeah.
We've heard tale in our show so far that there were lots of very talented bakers and very talented food prep people in and around Steyning. So yeah, that's wonderful. Oh, Henry, Henry looks like he's having a nice bit of a sunbathe.
He is. It's a very, very tiring day for him because he's mentally on the go all the time with people constantly wanting to make a fuss and donate to him. So it's quite a stimulating day for him.
Bless him.
I'm sure as the London Jacks did, he very much enjoys it. He looks forward to coming up here and having his coat put on and starting work.
Excellent. Well, while he's having a little sleep, I'll sneak off. John,
Righto.
Absolute pleasure.
Nice to meet you.
You too. Thank you so much.
Bye-bye.
As we head north then, I'm seeing this lovely picture of the goods shed. Where would that have been?
Fairly much in the middle of the road, Steve. Yeah.
Right, so kind of about here potentially.
Yeah.
Now what I'm noticing, you've got all these lovely sidings here because there was a cattle pen, wasn't there?
Yeah.
And lots of sort of loading bays. I'm quite taken with the design of this goods shed that would have been where those 70s houses are because it's got lovely arched windows with fan lights. They put quite a lot of care into the design, didn't they?
All that Victorian architecture is fantastic.
It's beautiful, isn't it? So I'm now kind of on the goods shed. So the track would have been there.
That's right.
If we continue to head up to the station building. Now, Chris, I'm a big fan of Oh, Dr. Beeching. Have you seen that? What struck me about that is there are loads of members of staff but hardly any passengers.
That's it.
Is that what Henfield would have been like?
Absolutely. I mean, in the 1920s, you had a couple of clerks, a signalman, station master and a porter working here. And towards the end of its time, you had three porters doing all the work of those previous staff.
So they almost knew the cuts were coming.
I think they probably did, yeah.
Now, looking at this estate, you would have no idea really, but there are still a few clues lingering.
There are.
I can see over here.
The lie of the land, you can see the actual shape of the earthworks, the embankment that goes up on the western side.
So that embankment is still there from the time of the railways?
Absolutely.
And there's just one key building that I need to find out where that was. Where was the actual station master's house?
Right here, and that was a combined station master's house and station, so rather than being two separate residences.
Was that quite unusual then?
Fairly unusual.
So they lived above above their place of work?
Which would have made it very much a hub of the local community.
Wow, that's a bit of easy commute, isn't it?
Yeah.
Had two waiting rooms apparently, one for riffraff and one for ladies.
One for the ladies, yes.
Was that unusual? Or?
No, that was quite common.
Really?
Yeah.
Segregated waiting rooms?
Yeah.
That seems a bit strange. Looking up here then, comparing it to your photos, I can see the bridge. The road is still there.
That's right, the bridge is still there.
The bridge is still there as well?
It's buried. When they just demolished the parapets to make a smooth road, but the bridge is all still sitting there.
That seems
buried.
crazy. What an archaeological challenge that might be.
Yeah.
Now, Alan from Henfield Museum told us a wonderful story. You were talking about clerks as part of the station staff. During the war, like Uncle Albert, apparently an English pilot had to get out of his plane and was parachuting down. The station staff saw him, thought he was an enemy, so they rushed to the booking office, grabbed shotguns from probably about here and ran to confront him. Can you believe that they kept shotguns in a railway station? And there's just one little lasting piece that I'm going to take a look at
Let's do that.
Now, thanks to a bit of copious door knocking by director Chris, we've been allowed into the back garden of one of these houses, and right over there I can see the gable of the Railway Hotel. Well, it's an inn, isn't it? The Railway Inn, the pub that used to be there at the time of the layout. But what's interesting, Chris, this is in the lead up to that great big bridge, and look what's in their garden. Some old railway sleepers that are trophies from the time of the old line, because presumably when all the track went, there would have been dozens of them around, and I expect a few were liberated, shall we say. So that's quite impressive, isn't it, having some old railway sleepers in your garden. And the bridge would have been just here, wouldn't it?
Absolutely. We would have been stood on the right-hand edge, and the arch of it would have been going to our left. Looking to the north, we are here.
Certainly a great thing to have in your garden.
Yeah. It was quite a hub for agriculture.
Ah, okay.
So a lot of milk churns to and froing to London and Brighton, but also sugar beet and potatoes were the big news. And there was a shed space purely for sugar beet, and lots of local farmer use of the station.
Now this might look like nothing, but this is really special, isn't it?
This is the last original.
These steps. These are the original steps from the old railway station.
That's right.
That took the passengers to and from the southbound platform up to the road.
Tremendous sense of history.
Yes.
There's not much left.
So if you're passing through Henfield, don't neglect these rather manky looking concrete steps, because this is our only piece of original history. So are these from the 1800s then? Or do you think they're probably...
I think they might be, but I don't actually know.
Gosh. And so the passengers would have just got off the train and stepped up here.
And sauntered up to the pub.
Yeah. And some of these buildings are the originals, aren't they?
Yeah. Plenty of them.
Gosh. So as I walk down this hill, Chris, I'm quite taken by how steep it is. And this brings me back to this point that I always make about the incredible work of the Victorian engineers, because as we've said before, railways don't like hills and railways don't like corners. So how do you think they managed to get the station level without all the big machines that they have these days?
Vast amounts of manpower, huge amounts of man hours digging and scraping in the absence of a mechanical excavator. But they didn't get it completely perfect, because the station is well known for having tricky gradients, especially in the goods yard, so shunting, stopping and starting was known to be a bit troublesome.
Wow, that's quite amazing, isn't it? Now, you might think there are absolutely no clues at all that there was ever a station here, but I am standing right in front of one. This is an electrical substation, and if you notice the sign, it says railway station. Now, there's a little bit of an irony here, isn't there? Because we learnt earlier that the only station along the line that had electric lighting was Bramber. All of the rest, right up to the end, were gas lit, including Henfield.
Yeah.
So they put this substation in, ready to upgrade the railway line, when in actual fact, all that happened is they closed it.
Yeah, never got used.
Never got used at all. But it's still here, so if you do come to Henfield, take a look at this little clue. Chris, I know you talked about potatoes and sugar beet, but there was another industry, and that was a fortnightly cattle market that took place just behind the White Hart pub in the town. And the railway was really important for that, because it brought the cattle to and from the market. That must have been quite a spectacular sight.
I'm sure it was, yeah.
So the railway helping local industry, and of course, don't forget the violets. Now, this rather sorry looking building is quite important really, because this is one of a few shops that were here right by the railway station. Do you remember this one?
I remember this one. This one didn't close all that long ago. It was a newsagent, local supplies, milk, bread, that kind of thing. It was very handy, and I very much wish it was still in operation.
Yeah.
We were lucky enough to secure an interview with Catherine Mant, who lived in one of these shops as a child, and she would have had a superb view across the station, seen all the comings and goings of the railway.
Now, Catherine is a member of the Steyning Society, and we are very grateful to that society, because they've contributed some equipment to us which has helped us make this series, so thank you for that.
Let's see what Stephen found out in the interview with Catherine.
Once again, we're delighted that we're able to get some memories from someone who used the Steyning Line, and I'd like to thank Catherine for letting us come and visit you so you can tell us about your amazing memories.
Yeah.
So what's your connection to the Steyning Line?
As a child, I was on it all the time, for one thing or another, mostly going to school or to visit my grandparents who lived in Steyning when we lived in Henfield. My parents owned the shop, the station stores, immediately opposite the station in Henfield when I was 5 years old. And at that time, Henfield Station had a goods yard. And so one of my very early memories is just hearing the crash and the shunt of goods wagons being shunted about 6:30 in the morning. It woke me up. And it was a lovely sound. It was busy and comforting. But also things like, one day, I suppose I was 16. I was going to school. I got on my train. I had these smart slip-on shoes, and one of my shoes slipped off and fell under the train. So I stood balanced on my stockinged foot.
On like a flamingo.
And the station master came with his broom and with the handle tried to hike it up, and he couldn't reach it. So a word was had with the station master, with the engine driver. So the engine driver took the train forward a few yards, well, more than a few yards, several yards down the line towards Shoreham. The station master managed to hike up my shoe. I put my shoe on, they backed the train down. I got on with both my shoes on and went to school.
That would never happen these days.
Can
would
you
it? My
imagine?
goodness. Can you imagine stopping a train for a shoe?
Yeah. Each of the stations on my line had its own separate character. They were all different. And of course, this is my personal view now of what their characters were. The ones I knew were Henfield, which, because it had the goods yard, it was a sort of busy working station, and it had that character. And Bramber, which is really the station I knew best, because I used to go to school in the opposite direction from Bramber. Bramber was a small station, but it was very house proud, very pretty, very well kept, lovely plants. As far as I remember, there were passion flowers growing right up the front of the station building.
Wow.
And it felt homely.
Your parents owned that store?
They owned station stores, yes.
Station stores?
Yes,
So
yes.
This was at the top of the stairs,
Yep.
top of the steps,
Yep.
and the other side of the road?
That's right, you came up the steps from the station. The station was quite deep.
Yes.
The steep steps up, came up, crossed the road, and the station stores was immediately opposite.
So what are your memories of, did they live above it? Did you live above it?
Behind it and above it.
Gosh.
Yeah, so two rooms were the stores, and then we had our house back and upstairs.
So you saw trains all the time? Or
Yes,
heard them?
well, you
smelled
heard them. You didn't see them, you heard them, and you heard the shunting yard, of course, which Henfield in those days had a goods yard, and so you heard the shunting, which happened in the early morning, so it'd wake you up. I have to say, they only ran it for about 5 years. It was not a very successful shop, as shops go. They had no experience of running a shop.
And there was a co-op, wasn't there, one side?
There was a co-op one side.
And what was the other side?
And the other side was a newsagent's,
Oh,
which I think is still there.
So actually quite a lot of competition for your
Ridiculous.
parents? No.
Ridiculous. And
Yeah.
they had no experience. So my father was then a chimney sweep. So he went off with his brushes on his bicycle and his beret. And my mother ran the shop, had no clue about running shops, had no clue about, she'd never had a job. My father was very soft-hearted. He let people run up huge bills
On the tab?
on the tab, especially old ladies. And then he was too soft-hearted to ask them
Oh dear.
to pay.
Not a very good business. I don't think Alan Sugar would be very impressed.
I don't think he would.
No.
And of course, if you did ask them to pay, they'd sniff and say, "Oh, I'll go next door then."
Oh dear. Oh, that's not very good.
So he had various ideas. My father was very eccentric, but at one stage he decided to grow mushrooms in the cupboard under the stairs to make money. So we had this cupboard which was full of mushrooms. It had this delicious mushroom smell. it was also, as it happened, where my mother kept all her childhood books, her children's books. And it was a slightly damp cupboard. So ever afterwards I've associated the idea of reading wonderful children's books with this idea, with this smell of mushrooms and mildew. It all goes together. It's very nostalgic.
Well, there we are. Thank you so much for sharing your memories. And if any of your family owe any money to the station stores, please get in touch with the Tracing Rails office and we'll forward your cheques on to Catherine. Well, it's all very sad that it's closed, but I see that it's sold. I wonder what it will be next. Now, Chris, one thing that's occurred to me in actual fact, we're quite a long way from the town centre,
We are.
aren't we?
It's a good 15 minutes walk, at least.
So when the why did they build the railway station here then, rather than in the town where it would have had a more practical purpose?
It's a number of reasons. Cost, mostly, in that it would have been more expensive to put a dog's leg in and get closer to the town. But also the railway company may not have been able to buy the land that they wanted. This is probably as close to the town as they could get conveniently and cost efficiently.
Now, these shops then would have been really useful. In fact, one of them up till the 60s was a co-op. And you can still see the wording on the side of the building, which is amazing.
Brilliant.
Now, in terms of original buildings, as we head down Station Road, this rather decrepit looking place is rather something special, isn't it? This used to belong to Birchett and Hards, and it was a transport hub.
Yeah, it would have had use in relation to the railway. It's looking a bit sad now, and if you look at various walls, they're bulging out where the weight of ivy has damaged it somewhat.
So I wouldn't be surprised if this gets knocked down.
I'll be amazed if it doesn't come down soon.
Now, we got a photograph, courtesy of Henfield Museum, from the 1920s, showing a Birchett and Hards lorry in its World War I livery just outside this building. Now, this is rather lovely, isn't it?
Very nice.
Here we are outside the old railway, which is just a stone's throw from the Henfield Station, which was over there. But it wasn't always called this, was it?
No, it originally started life as the Station Hotel, later becoming the Cat and Canary.
Now, there's an interesting story about that. In Henfield town, on opposite sides of a little green, lived two people. One kept cats and the other one kept canaries. And you know where this is going, don't you?
Fatality coming.
There was a fatality coming. One day, one naughty little cat decided to have an interaction with those canaries, resulting in a lot of canary gravestones. And this caused quite a bit of resentment between the two householders. And for many years, there was a bit of rivalry. Interesting though, if you go into Henfield, there's a beautiful old thatched cottage that's got the cats and the canaries actually written or drawn on the side of the house.
It's called the Cat House.
The Cat House.
Yeah.
Beautiful. It's well worth seeing, actually. But then, how come it's called the Old Railway then?
Well, they changed the name back, really, to reflect more railway history rather than the Cat and Canary history. I think there's also probably a promotional thing, you know, people passing through on the bikes, knowing they're on the old railway. It connects the cyclists.
And they've got their lovely new sign with a picture of a
very
train
nice.
on.
Yeah.
Now, interesting, I was thinking about this, Chris. If you got off the station here at Henfield as a passenger, unless you lived here, there really wasn't that much for you to do.
Love it.
Because you had the parade of shops down there. This was the only place you could stay, and the rest was just residential properties and actually not much. When you look at old photographs, there really wasn't that much here. So unlike Steyning and Bramble, which were very touristy and people driven, this was really more about goods and trade, wasn't it, Henfield?
Yeah.
Now, if you want to know what it was like living in Henfield, there's a nice story from a chap called Tony Adfield. He told his story, and we know this because he went to Steyning Grammar School in 2002, and this is what he said. I moved into the station house, Henfield, during 1935 at the tender age of 5. My father, Charlie, was a porter signalman at Henfield Station. I can recall Friday the 1st of September 1939. I was on holiday at my grandmother's home in Southwick. The international situation had deteriorated. Germany had invaded Poland, and my mother decided that I should be brought home as war was imminent. So it was on the evening of Friday, the 1st of September 1939, that I travelled with my mother on the train from Southwick to Henfield. A blackout, as national air raid precaution, had just been decreed by the government, and joining the Brighton to Horsham train on that evening was my first experience of the blackout. As far as I can remember, the train consisted of a steam tank engine and a 2-coach pull and push set. All of the lights on the train had been painted blue, giving just enough light to see, but not enough to read by. Come Sunday, the 3rd of September 39, we listened at Station House in Henfield to the now famous broadcast by Neville Chamberlain at 11 o'clock in the morning.
This morning, the British ambassador in Berlin handed the German government a final note stating that unless we heard from them by 11 o'clock, that they were prepared at once to withdraw their troops from Poland, a state of war would exist between us. I have to tell you now that no such undertaking has been received, and that consequently this country is at war with Germany.
After that transmission, the air raid sirens sounded and tens of people rushed up to the bridge in front of the old station hotel. I've come to Ford in West Sussex, a beautiful little place south of Arundel. But hang on a minute, Ford isn't on the Steyning Line. Why are we here? Ford is known for its prison, its airfield, but also one other very special reason. And for this next segment, I'm going to be joined by a guest presenter, the wonderful Dawn Quest, who presents a YouTube channel, Model Railway Quest. Dawn, lovely to meet you. Thank you so much for joining me today. We're going to be talking model railways, and we've come to a very special place that I think you are going to love.
Lovely.
Should we take a look?
Definitely, let's go ahead.
The engine shed.
Ah.
So Dawn, what do you think of this place?
Oh my goodness, this is like being a kid in a sweet shop, isn't it? It's amazing.
It is remarkable. This is one of the biggest model railways. We think it's the biggest model railway shop in Britain. Prove us wrong if you like, but this is definitely worth a visit. Now, I always wonder what gets people started into model railways. For me, my dad brought my brother a Flying Scotsman Hornby set when my brother was 6 months old. So that was clearly for him, wasn't it? But what about you?
Well, different story for me. I didn't have a train set under the Christmas tree, but I loved making dolls' houses. And then a friend of mine asked me to paint some of the figures on his layout. And then I looked at the layout and thought, I could make those houses, I could make those trees. I went to a few model railway shows and I was hooked. I really wanted to make my own layout, so I did.
Fantastic. And the thing is as well, these models are so intricate, aren't they, when you actually look at the detail. So even if you're interested in miniature things, this is a great way of sort of pursuing that interest, isn't it?
Absolutely, and I think it's the details. Sometimes people get put off because they think they need to know all about locos, but they really don't. And I'm a great believer in encouraging as many people into the hobby as possible. Women, younger people, don't be put off by all the jargon. Just follow kind of your passion, if you like, and just start getting interested, dip a toe in, and soon you'll be hooked like I was.
Dawn, as we're talking about Henfield in this episode, I actually went to Henfield Museum because they have got a 00 gauge model of Henfield Station, which of course is no longer there. Alan Barwick is the wonderful curator at the museum, and if you go along, you can actually see it for yourself.
Well, can't wait to see that. Let's see how he got on.
Now I'm here with Alan Barwick, who's got some memories of his time as a child from Henfield Station.
Yes, that's true. I travelled on the train down to Steyning to go to school between 1961 and 1966. So initially it was a steam train because the steam train was still running up to 1964, and then after that the diesel units were put on for the last couple of years before the line finally closed. So yes, I used to cycle down from Knepp Town, go through, come into the station through the Goodyards entrance there, which is now the entrance into the Beechings estate, come across and leave my bicycle just leaned up against the wall inside the goods shed. And then the up train coming into the station came in before our train. So what the kids used to do was to put pennies onto the line at this crossing point here by the signal box, and then you could recover your pennies after the train had left and before our train went down to Steyning.
So you'd leave the penny on the railhead of a operating track, and the steam train would squish over the top of it. It would
squish over it, and it would end up a nice egg-shaped penny. And I've still got my egg-shaped penny 1962 vintage at home today.
I'm here with Eddie Colgate. Eddie, this model is just wonderful. Can you explain some of the things that are on here for everyone to look at?
Right, well, I can explain the trains because each one to me is very special. Across here on the up platform, which has come from Brighton and is off towards Horsham, it's the morning school children's train for people like my sister going up to Horsham, and it's being pushed. The fireman is in the cab there, the driver's at the front here, and they'd have a signal business, bells, for when the fireman had to put on the brakes, etc. So that's the old school train taking my sister to Henfield. This is the daily newspaper and fish train from London Bridge. Used to leave at 5-6 in the morning and chug its way through masses of stations, and they always had South Eastern and Chatham, the slow, easy and comfortable carriages on, with the guard's van birdcage where the guard would sit up on a raised seat and check everything was correct. And the first class had a compartment with armchairs in it that you could move around, and that was really lovely.
And that's how you always travelled, wasn't it? First class.
Surprisingly enough, because my father rose up far enough in the continental division of the railways, he eventually earned this fantastic sum of £10 a week.
Wow.
And had first class. And my sister and I had several times when we were attempted to be kicked out of the first class because we were in their ragged clothes.
Oh.
Hold up the ticket. Oh no! Off we'd go. So there's the fish train. So there's the trains of the...
Wonderful. And there's not much that survives to this day, is there? I think just these steps survive.
I'm afraid that's it. They've gone. The station building's gone. Those houses, railway workers have gone. And it's a housing estate called Beechings, after dear Mr. Beeching, who closed the line for us.
How ironic.
Yeah.
Eddie, thank you so much for sharing your memories.
Lovely. Pleasure.
Here we are then, back in the model railway shop. And for me, Dawn, the thing I love that always draws my eye first is the rolling stock. Particularly steam locomotives. I've got a thing for them. But of course, many people like building the actual world themselves, don't they? Never mind the trains, it's all about the actual the buildings and things. So
Absolutely.
What are your options then?
Well, this is my forte here. I love the scenery side of it. Lots to choose from. You've got a range of buildings from different manufacturers. You can buy trees, you can buy animals, but here you see all of these lovely buildings, stations, goods sheds, platform islands. The world is your oyster here.
And some look like they're ready-made if you're not perhaps as confident, and others are kits, aren't they?
That's right. You can buy a range of kits which you just have to glue together, and then you can kit bash them a bit. Take a bit of one, a bit of the other, glue them together, add your own bits and pieces. That's the fun side.
When you're building something, do you think it's important that you stick on a particular era or geographical period, or what's your main rule for this?
Well, the number one rule of model railways is it's my model railway. I can do what I want with it. So there you go.
If I wanted to build a specific model of Steyning railway station, which was demolished in the 60s, how would I do that?
Well, the way to go about it is, of course, to go back in history, study all the photographs that you can from as many different angles as you can. And then I think it's about scratch building it, using lots of different materials, so much on offer in terms of materials, and trying to get it as faithful to the original as possible. Now, throughout the series of Tracing the Rails, we have, of course, been following the Steyning Line, but not all of fans of the Steyning Line live in the area. One particular fan, Dave Pavey, made a model of the Steyning Station. He recently moved to the West Country and took his model with him, but luckily for us, he sent us a video.
We've come to the nerve centre of Gauge Master here in West Sussex, and we're very grateful to be joined by Ian Fowler, CEO of Gauge. That sounds so impressive, doesn't it? And actually, Ian and I have got something in common. We both started working here at the age of 16 as Saturday boys, didn't we?
Yes, we did. Not at the same time.
No. However, you've grown on to greater things, and I left when I was 19 to join the police.
Yeah, I never went away. I'm that guy at parties that when they say, what do you do? It always provokes something. And that's something I've always found really encouraging, is that when you say, I'm the guy that sells model railways, model kits, Scout Electric, it's like, oh wow, my dad, my uncle used to do that, or my granddad, or my mum, or whatever. And everyone's got an interest in it. So it's absolutely fascinating to be in a world where we are selling sunshine. It's not a ransom purchase. It's something that people really, really want to do.
Absolutely. I mean, there are challenges facing the industry, as we talked about, and getting that interest from younger people. What challenges do you see in terms of getting them away from screens and computers?
I think time is in terms of parents and carers and people sort of having so many external commitments.
We're focusing here on tracing the rails on the old Steyning Line, Ian, which of course closed in the late 60s or mid to late 60s. And even though the railway has gone, you can still see some of the rolling stock because there are locos such as this one here. This is a beautiful model, isn't it?
That's a Dapol Terry that we used to do, and something that I take great pride in is when I'm telling people about what we do here is I always say to them, anything you can think of in the real world, we will do a small version of it, whether that be a building or a type of figure or the locomotives and rolling stock. And of course the first rule of model railways is my railway, my rules, and then right down to end scale at 1148, which is like a little tiny 7-plank wagon. Which was of course commonplace, and as you can see, we like that one so much we manufactured them across the spectrum of scales as well.
This is a great Sussex connection as well, like Sussex Brick Company, Horsham, because we've actually featured brick making on the series, and here we have a great example of O gauge, double O and N. You can see it right in front of you, the different scales and all the figures as well, so you can actually build an entire world, can't you? Amazing stuff. Well, thank you very much, Ian, for letting us come and have a look.
And thanks for letting me show off our fine wares.
Well, Dawn, it's been wonderful. Thank you so much for joining us here on Tracing the Rails.
It's been a pleasure, thank you.
Of course, we've talked about Henfield's industrial past, but it would be remiss of us not to mention Henfield's horticultural past. The fertile soil in this little corner of Sussex led to multiple cottage industries, market gardens and orchards springing up in the town. Indeed, it's quite strange to think that some of these houses have got apple trees in the garden that were once part of a much bigger orchard. For me though, I think it's the violets which are most special about Henfield, and the story I'm about to tell you is about two very special ladies, Ada Brown and Decima Allen, who in 1905 bought a Grade 2 listed 500-year-old cottage standing just off Henfield Common. It was partly thanks to the railway that this business succeeded, and I think the more we look into the past of this, the history of it, was actually an accidental surprise, an accidental success that led to what effectively became a defining item from Henfield. Lavender Cottage seems quite ironic considering they grew violets here. The railway allowed the two ladies to have access to the flower markets in London and to a patronage that literally spanned the country. And these weren't just any old patrons. These were some very, very important and very big names from the time. Of course, like any business, the nursery was happy to sell to anyone who would buy their goods. But I've got a list here of some very distinguished patrons of the nursery. Her Grace the Duchess of Norfolk, Her Grace the Duchess of Westminster, Lady Margaret Savile, Lady Marjorie Mackenzie, and of course the Queen of England herself. Now, the nurseries have been rather shrewd and sent the Queen of England a sample of their products, and she was so impressed she actually gave them her royal patronage. One thing you're going to need lots of if you're going to run a nursery is water, obviously, to water the plants. And it must have been quite challenging when they were running this place as a nursery, because they didn't have hoses, they didn't have, underground irrigation systems. They literally had these, and very few of them. This is, I believe, the original well that was used to water the nursery. Every day, all day pretty much, the workers on the site would have come here to get water in their watering cans and go out and water the cold frames, the clochers, and later the greenhouses. Talking of royal patronage, it's a very, very impressive thing to have. But there's also the other end of the spectrum as well. The violet became the symbol of the suffragette movement. Suffragettes could identify themselves by wearing a violet buttonhole or carrying a violet corsage with them. I think, if you look back through the records, the census of 1911 shows that the two ladies who owned this place, Ada Brown and Decima Allen, refused to sign the census. This could be seen as a protest, if you like, a protest against the male-dominated norm that shows their success for those brave suffragettes. So these cold frames then, which contained the violets, were literally just in what is now the front garden of this beautiful cottage. And to our 21st century sensibilities, the thought of starting an industry next to such a beautiful old building or in the grounds of a beautiful old building seems kind of preposterous. But at the time this was the norm. This cottage wasn't even lived in when the nurseries were here. The two ladies who ran it had the 18th century house next door. This photo shows the Allen Brown cart, which carried flowers to the station. Smaller parcels were sent by post from the post office. This shows the cottage itself as the centre of the operation, where primarily women were employed to package the flowers. Are you sitting comfortably? Then I'll begin. The rose is the queen of the English garden by right divine and by general acclamation. Other favourites stand near her throne: the clear smiling carnation, the pure lily of the valley, the fairy-like but ambitious sweet pea, who casts an eye upon the very crown itself, and the violet who, like King Cophetua's beggar maid, wears her honours with a sweet remembrance of her lowly past. What a beautiful and rather poetic preface to a book called The Violet Book by A&D Allen Brown, the very same ladies who ran the nursery here in Henfield. Now, we've got some other bits and pieces that show just how successful their little business venture was. You know you've made it nationally when you can advertise in the Tatler. This is from November the 13th, 1929. And there's a very wordy advert. I won't read it all, but there's a couple of bits and pieces that are interest. There are many who think of the hillsides in France and elsewhere, which in the spring are covered with flowers that are carefully plucked and then passed on to the perfumer. Sometimes it is overlooked that at the violet nurseries at Henfield, millions of violets are grown every year. So this is literally a half-page advert in the Tatler, a very prominent paper of the time, for Christmas gifts from the violet nurseries. We've got solid face powder, violet-scented soap, and old Sussex potpourri. The best thing, and I always leave the best to last, however, is this. This is a genuine pot of talcum powder.
Allen Brown talcum powder, English violet talcum powder. This exclusive preparation is obtainable only from the pharmacy, Henfield, Sussex. Telephone Henfield 30.
H.J. Burt, that's a name we're certainly familiar with. here on Tracing the Rails. I come to the centre of Henfield because I'm looking for the George, one of the pubs, one of the many historic buildings, such as this lovely one with, do you remember foot scrapers? They were all the rage in the Victorian era. You don't really see them around quite so much now. Do you remember in a previous episode, I talked about the notion of when did a railway form? Was it the discussions? Was it the paperwork? Or was it the first shovel in the ground? Well, Henfield has got its own claim to fame about their part in the creation of our Steyning Line. And that's because on the 19th of December 1857, there was a meeting at the George, which is where I'm heading now. This was put on by the London, Brighton and South Coast Railway Company, and it was a discussion about having a railway line. This was in competition with other companies who also wanted to build a line, such as one from Dorking to Brighton via Horsham, Steyning and Shoreham. And all of these meetings were part of the mix that ended up eventually becoming our railway line. I can see the George just ahead of me, so let's take a look. Ah, and here it is. This is the George, a classic English coaching inn, now a pub, restaurant and hotel. But the site actually goes back to 1578, and it's amazing to think that parts of this building are over 400 years old, although probably not the TV aerial and the drain pipes. There's a book called Sussex in Bygone Days by MP Blaker, and in that they reference that there was a meeting about the railway coming through Henfield that took place at Southdown House, which was opposite the chemist's. Now, there is actually a chemist a couple of doors down. I wonder if that's in the same place, in which case Southdown House would have been over there. There was certainly another meeting here at the George in 1861 about the railway itself. I'm going to take a look through the window and imagine what it would have looked like inside. On the 1st of July 1861, the proposal became reality and the railway line opened between Shoreham and Partridge Green, giving Henfield its very first railway service. In fact, the museum here in Henfield has got the original timetable bill. So this is the Elaichi restaurant now. This is in the old 400-year-old Tudor building. Look at all these magnificent old oak beams. And in here, gosh, look, there's an absolutely vast fireplace. 400 years of history and a railway connection. So of course, for the first few hundred years, no such thing as a railway. They did actually extend this building. It looks like it's sort of Edwardian or Victorian. What a lot of history. Certainly well worth checking out if you come to Henfield. Walking along this rather unassuming road, you wouldn't think that there was any railway connection at all. You would think even less that in actual fact I'm standing on top of a tomb of an old railway bridge, because this point here is where the railway went right underneath me and onward up towards Partridge Green. But like the bridge at Bramber, they didn't destroy it. Instead, they hid it. When you look at all the soil and the landscape here, when it came to the closure of the railway, they actually just pushed tons and tons of soil up to and underneath the bridge. And the only part they destroyed or demolished was the parapet. So it now just looks like an ordinary road, but if we were able to excavate, right beneath me is the buried and hidden bridge. Over there are the gardens of the houses that we saw earlier on. Interesting, isn't it, when we were just talking about the war then, that during the Battle of Britain, people assembled on this bridge, leant over the edge and watched the skies for all the vapour trails and the dogfights that were taking place. You would never think that now, though, all these years later. Well, now it's time for me to head off further up the line towards Partridge Green. I've walked north from Henfield up towards Partridge Green, and for quite a while there was nothing really railway related, and you get a little bit despondent that perhaps these lovely old clues are thinning out. But then all of a sudden you come across something like this, another wonderful bridge that once took the railway line over probably an old farm track. This one looks like it's in remarkably good condition. The brickwork is solid with no cracks, and on top it's got one of the steel girder constructions that we've seen elsewhere down the line. But what is interesting is what's behind it over here. It's another pillbox. Remember we saw one of these earlier down the line. This one is a set of two that were built to protect Betley Bridge, which we're just heading up towards now. This one points north towards the river, the other one points south towards the river, and they were there to protect this bridge because it was a vulnerable point of attack during World War II. It's no wonder that this is still here because, my goodness, look at the thickness of that concrete. This was Betley Farmhouse, later to become Great Betley Farmhouse. And today it's the Great Betley Farmhouse Hotel, a wonderful wedding venue if you ever fancy a visit. And I'd like to thank the manager Kim for letting us come here. Now you might be wondering, why are we at a farmhouse? Well, this place had a very important railway connection. You may remember we mentioned a man called Tony Adfield, whose father worked on the railway during the time of the Second World War. He worked as a signalman, and Tony wrote some memoirs about his time working on the railway. And I would like to read a very interesting extract to you. Whenever there had been enemy activity and bombs had been heard to explode in the locality, before any train was allowed to proceed, the line had to be examined physically by a person actually walking the track to ensure that it was clear and safe. For example, if bombs had been heard exploding to the north of Henfield, a member of the station staff on duty at Henfield, and sometimes that was only one person, i.e. my father, would walk the line as far as the Betley River Bridge, where he would meet up with a member of staff who would walk down from Partridge Green. If no person was available from Partridge Green, then the Henfield man would walk on to Partridge Green to examine the line. Only then, when the track was given the all clear, would trains be allowed to pass over that part of the track, and even then, only at caution. Likewise, the same procedure would be conducted if bombs were heard south of Henfield, with the meeting up point being Stretham River Bridge, with somebody walking up from Steyning. To my recollection, there was only one occasion when the railway track was damaged. That was on Monday, the 4th of November, 1940, at around 4:45 p.m, when a Junkers 88, a German twin-engine fighter bomber, dive-bombed the railway bridge over the River Ada at Betley. I can recall being in the garden at Station House Henfield, hearing a low-flying aircraft. I looked up and saw the German plane gaining height after making its bombing run. The official log states that there was some machine gunfire, but I do not remember that from the aircraft. It may well be that some army units in the area fired off their weapons. This caused the strafing damage to the bridge. The aircraft had released 2 high explosive bombs. One bomb landed beside the railway embankment about 200 yards south of the river bridge, and the other bomb had hit the railway down line, ricocheting along the track for about 100 yards, badly scorching the wooden sleepers, bounced off the railway track and landed flat on its side in a field to the east of the track in front of a farm cottage before it exploded. It is said that this was the bomb that had the greatest blast effect, so powerful it shattered shop windows in Henfield High Street over a mile away. About 200 yards south of the Betley River Bridge, there used to be a hut used by railway plate layers, a term used then for railway maintenance workers. On this particular day, the gang of platelayers based at Henfield and Partridge Green were sitting in the hut at the end of their day's work, finishing their flask of tea and sandwiches, when they heard the low-flying aircraft, followed by a thud and a tremendous rush of wind. Upon opening the door of the hut, they found that they were on the edge of a massive bomb crater. To give some idea as to the size of the crater, it took 20 railway ballast wagons full of chalk to even start to fill it in. One can still see the site of the crater today. It now takes the form of a farmyard pond. This one. At last I've made it to Betley Bridge. This is the third and final river crossing that takes our line over the River Adur. Further south or downstream, the river has actually split, and this is the eastern fork of the Adur. And looking at the river today, you would never believe that Bay Bridge Canal Company barges were able to come this far inland. I'd quite like to take a look underneath and see what I can find. There's one particular reason that I wanted to get a close look at Betley Bridge, and that is because a lot of people have documented that there are still visible bullet marks on these wonderful brick structures from the war. This is because the bridge came under attack, and even though those bullet marks have been repaired, they apparently are still visible, although I haven't found it. But better luck if you manage to find them yourself. But it is a beautiful structure. You can see here all this ancient brickwork with these enormous padstones that carry these vast steel beams across the river. Now let's take a look at the bit that goes over the river. Gosh, you can still really clearly see that this is a railway bridge. One line is currently the Downslink, the other one carries that gas pipe. And even though it's years old, the structure is still so beautiful. In the early to mid 1960s, they stopped running steam trains on this line as they'd converted over to DEMUs, diesel electric multiple units, which people living along the line were actually quite happy about because they were cleaner and quieter. For example, on washing day, they used to get all their washing covered in smuts from the old steam trains. So certainly it was a little bit of a win then. And of course, in the late 1960s, the line fell silent after it closed. A real contrast from the noise and the mess, particularly during the war, to the tranquility that it is today. And here is the other pillbox. I have to say it's a lot easier to find than the other one, which was buried in the undergrowth, but this is the northern side of the railway line, and it really does show the strategic importance of not only our Steyning Line but also Betley Bridge. Soldiers would be on duty inside this, and it would afford them protection from attack. On the 28th of July 1941, a Junkers Ju-88 was actually shot down here, and it crashed in nearby Partridge Green. It wasn't the same one that caused the bomb craters, but it was the same make and model. As I leave Henfield and head up towards Partridge Green, I'm certainly enjoying this beautiful Sussex countryside. And it's amazing to think, isn't it, that the Steyning Line opened in 1861, connecting these vibrant communities with the heart of Sussex.
The Steyning Line opened in 1861, connecting these vibrant communities with the heart of Sussex.
Today, all that's left are the echoes of history.
But if you know where to look... Hang on.
Have you just said what I just said?
I think you just said what I just said. What's going on here?
Am I in your documentary?
Am I in yours? Are you making a documentary about my documentary?
I think we might be.
I'm confused.
Which camera do I look at?
Goodness knows.
I think we might have to sit down and sort this out.
I wouldn't mind, actually. I've gone a little bit funny.
Yeah. That's bizarre.
Stephen.
Rob. Lovely to meet you. This is bizarre, isn't it? Rob Bell off Walking Britain's Lost Railways.
Here we are.
Rob, I'm a big fan of Walking Britain's Lost Railways. What a dream job to present. Because on our series, we focus on one line over the entire series.
Yeah.
But you have been all over the country, England, Wales, Scotland and Ireland.
Yeah.
Out of all of those, was there one line in particular that had surprising either history or...
That's a difficult question, Stephen. We did 20 episodes, as you say, right around the UK. Do you know, up on the Morayshire coast, the line between Lossiemouth and Port Soy, that sticks in my mind, A, because it was absolutely stunning. The weather up there was amazing when we shot it. But I absolutely loved what that line used to serve, the industries of the fishing up there and the whiskey. And I like my fish, I like my whiskey, so I really enjoyed that. So that stuck with me. You know, the first one we did was the old Woodhead line between Sheffield and Manchester. So
the Woodhead Pass.
The Woodhead Pass
Yeah.
and the Woodhead Tunnel, which is now used, well, when I shot it, it was used for electricity cables to go through. So there's a lovely little bit of how previous era of engineering of the Woodhead Tunnel that the railways used to go, the trains used to go through now, is being used for something else. So. Yeah, I don't know. I don't even know if I've answered your questions there. I'm just reminiscing from the lines.
There's too much, isn't there? With all this historical content, how do you address it when you're sort of writing or researching or filming this for a modern audience? Because trying to explain these things that were from 200 years ago might be difficult to grasp, perhaps.
Yeah, and you know what, this is, you know, you touched on this, I think, how you said the difference between the series I did and the series you guys do in Tracing the Rails. You can really get into the details of the Steyning Line, right? You can really luxuriate in that history in every tiny little detail, and I love that about what you guys are doing. We didn't have that luxury because you've got to move on.
You do a whole line in 45 minutes.
In 45 minutes, absolutely. Yeah. And I think what the difficulty is, if there's something really interesting about that line, you have to be able to show it.
And speaking of people watching TV programmes, are we going to see any more episodes of your programme, Walking Britain's Lost Railways? 20 is a fine number, but perhaps there should be more.
Yeah, it's been a while now, though, Stephen. I can't remember when we finished doing that. Well, yeah, it was a good few years ago. I would have loved to have done. Yeah. Let's get that on record. Yeah. Because I mean, it was a great gig.
It wasn't bad, is it?
Yeah, it was really lovely.
Yeah.
I do miss it. I really, really miss shooting those. I've thought about trying to bring it back in my own sense, you know, go on in podcast form or along the lines of what you do, but I don't have the time to do it. Yeah. You'll know what it takes to put this together.
Yeah, there's a lot of hours involved.
And I was so grateful to all the teams who did that. So there are no plans in the pipeline that I know, but never say never, because I would love to pick up those reins again should the opportunity arise.
If anyone at home wanted to get into railway engineering, what advice might you give them then, do you think?
Well, there's a real need for engineers generally. There's a real need for railway engineers. You know, things are moving on at pace within the railway industry. We're celebrating Railway 200 this year, which is a great
marker. Amazing, isn't it?
And there's loads of communications and there's loads of activities to try and get people interested, to try and turn people's heads perhaps towards a career in engineering, whatever that may be, but a career in railway engineering. And it's really exciting, I would say. Get involved however you can. If you know somebody who works at a railway, go and do some work experience, or a heritage railway. Go and volunteer your time
and work your way up
and see if it does kind of resonate with you.
Now, I know one thing I did notice, Rob, about your series on the railways is your outfit was much more suitable than mine. I'm not just saying, producer Lou, how come Rob had like walking boots and jackets and a rucksack, and I've been given a waistcoat? I must mention your rucksack because that receives fan mail, doesn't it? Let's take a look.
It's way more popular than me. Yeah.
I remember seeing on your
rightly
socials
so.
that this was getting so much attention.
I've been asked about it so many times. And I mean, I could put it on the record, maybe to finally put it now. It's made by Brooks.
Okay.
Brooks cycle bags, like the guy, you know, Brooks, the guys who do the leather saddles for bikes. I haven't seen that many of them around. I saw it, I liked it, I thought that would be great.
And it's in every episode.
It's in every single episode. I really loved it. It became a part of me. I still really enjoy that rucksack.
The other thing I noticed about your filming is, you filmed in some atrocious weather, didn't you? Looking at the rain, and you're still with a smile on your face, delivering this piece to camera in the drizzle. Well, Rob, it's been an absolute treat. Thank you so much for doing this. What a random encounter.
I know.
But
what are the chances?
Maybe our paths will cross in the future.
I wish you all the best for what you're doing, guys.
Thank you very much.
I absolutely love it. I'm a big fan, Stephen.
Well, I better get on with my programme, and you better get on with your programme.
Finish mine.
Yeah, I'm going that way. Nice to see you.
I'm off there.
All the best.
Take care.
Cheers. The one lovely thing about walking an old railway line is you see some beautiful signs of nature, and these are rather charming, aren't they? Now, as I head up the line towards Partridge Green, I'm thinking about the role that this railway played during the Blitz. We've already mentioned that the railway was a pretty important part of the war effort, and this particular stretch between Henfield and Partridge Green had particular importance because it was used to move Canadian troops. Interestingly as well, of course, a lot of big cities were damaged, like London and Portsmouth, and rubble from those demolished buildings was brought by rail to here, and Canadian engineers would use that rubble to build what's known affectionately as Tank Road near Gray's Farm. And this was used as a kind of practice ground for the D-Day landing, so the importance of the line for the war cannot be underestimated. I have to say, I'm rather envious of the passengers who travelled on the Steyning Line, because just look at this beautiful scenery. The railway line ran through undulating farmland, over bridges and through cuttings, with spectacular views of the South Downs, now of course the wonderful South Downs National Park. I can even see Chanctonbury Ring on the horizon. You can certainly see, can't you, that this part of the Downslink footpath was an old railway line. Look at that classic layout. A straight, long, flat bit of track used by cyclists, walkers, and even horse riders. And I'm doing a bit of a merry dance over some horse droppings here, and I think Chris on the camera's just gone through one. But this is another point on the path where the Downslink actually diverges from the old railway line, because according to my dad's old 1957 map, we are right by Homelands Farm, just shy of Partridge Green itself. And here, as you can see, we're presented by a set of locked gates with a bit of manure up there. So this is where I've got to head left down the path onto the B road and head into Partridge Green that way. Partridge Green Station was a beautiful example of Victorian railway design. Its main building followed the classic L plan, with a two-storey station master's house connected to a single-storey booking office. Practical yet charming, this layout was mirrored in other stations along the line, such as Southwater. This is the Star Trading Estate in Partridge Green, and when they asked me to present this series, I thought I would be going to some super luxurious and gorgeous locations. Well, I have, but this isn't quite what I had in mind. And looking around, you would have no idea that there was ever a railway line here. And in fact, right where I'm standing, the two tracks would have swept up towards Partridge Green Station, and down the line that way is Henfield. Remembering, of course, that when the line was first opened in 1861, it was a single track that ran from Shoreham to Partridge Green. And those first passengers who excitedly took that journey must have been quite bewildered when they got off at Partridge Green, because there really wasn't anything there, just a pub. And this is that pub, the Partridge, where all those passengers would have visited when they got off the train. It was only really when the line was extended and could connect to trains that took people to and from London that a little bit of a tourist industry became apparent here because of the beautiful country walks. But when it opened, that future vision really wasn't a thing. To my best estimations, I'm actually sitting right in the middle of the old railway line, and just over there, in what is now those industrial buildings, that's where the station building was. Now, when the line opened, the London, Brighton and South Coast Railway Company were pretty keen to attract customers and visitors to the area. So they released this article in the West Sussex Gazette on July the 25th, 1861, just a few short weeks after the line opened. The London, Brighton and South Coast Railway, having opened the line from Partridge Green to Shoreham on July the 1st, have astonished our country cousins by giving them an opportunity to visit Portsmouth at the low charge of 2 shillings there and back. There were no less than 55 from Partridge Green, a greater portion of whom had never seen a railway train until the opening day. Henfield sent 50, Steyning 50 and Bramber 30 passengers for a day's pleasure at a charge which, had anyone hinted a few years since, he would have thought a fit subject for a lunatic asylum. It's rather difficult to calculate what the population of Partridge Green would have been when the line opened, but the villagers evidently came from far and wide to see the engine there. Probably there were about 60 people crowding around at the time of the very first steam train. These were principally boys and older men. We found out that one of them was actually born in Partridge Green in 1779 and lived there all his lifetime, and he thought he would never see such a thing as a railway. Jean Hammond, who grew up in the railway cottages at Partridge Green, recalled an unusual piece of history. Her aunt actually lived in a converted Pullman carriage, parked right here in the village. This isn't so unusual though, if you think back to Bungalow Town that we mentioned earlier in the series. And this is the other side of the gates at the top end of the industrial estate. So now we're back into a little road with lots of houses, and you would need a lot of imagination to ever imagine that there was a railway station here. The line actually went right through here where those houses are, and it intersected the road quite unusually at a 45-degree angle. There was a beautiful latticed footbridge that went over the line, and unusually it had a roof over it, which was rather charming. Now, luckily, we've been given permission to look in the back garden of one of these houses where there are a few clues of the old railway. Thank you, Tony and Simon, by the way, for letting me have a look in their back garden, because I can get a much better view of the old brickwork. And here it is. This is the start of the parapet that took the road over the railway line. And behind this buddleia, there's always a buddleia by a railway line, you can see where that ladder's leaning against the wall. That's where the tracks went through. It has subsequently been bricked up, of course, but there's one more thing I'd like to show you, and I can see it here. Now, what you might notice is there is a brick pillar, like a great big statue, standing up in the back of the garden. What on earth is that? Well, the footbridge that took passengers from one side of the platform to the other was actually T-shaped. There was a little piece that spurred off and joined up with the road, and that pillar is where the footbridge once was joined on. I'm relying on photographs and maps to look at where the railway was, but as always, the best way to get information about how Partridge Green Station once looked is from someone who's lived here all his life. Chris Mason, lovely to meet you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for letting us have a chat with you here on Tracing the Rails. You have lived right here, right by the railway line, your entire life,
Yes.
haven't you?
Yes.
So what do you remember?
I can remember going to school on the train in 11 plus in those days. So I was born in 1948. So 59, I was going to Steyning School on the train with others, you know, not just me, all the kids their age, down to Steyning School to the secondary modern school. Still there now, of course, as it is.
And you lived in the shadow of the railway station, so that must have been a super duper commute for you. Just a few minutes walk.
I lived on the railway station.
You lived on the station?
In the railway house.
Wow. Is this because your
Yeah,
parents...
my dad worked on the railway.
Wow. Gosh, so you've grown up with trains all your life?
Trains went by the living room window.
What was that like? I mean, for you,
Well,
it was
for a kid,
it was normal, wasn't it? But
it was normal.
What did all your friends think?
Well, I don't know actually. The house wasn't up to standard, say, as the new council houses that were being built in the 50s then. But we could have a goods train in my back garden.
That must have been amazing.
Garden. There was a buffer stop in the back garden. The trains come up and came into what we used to call the goods shed, and then once a week the coal train came in and delivered coal to the coal merchants. 2 coal merchants in Partridge Green then, Searles and Tidies.
Gosh, that's amazing. And of course, it must be very strange for you having those memories from 60 years ago, and it's so different now, but you can just see little glimpses.
Yes, I remember it well. I remember it very well.
What was it like in 1966 when you were 18, when they announced that the line was closing? Did that mean your dad lost his job, or was he redeployed?
No, my dad, before that, my dad changed from being like a relief porter here, and he went on the railways at Shoreham as a train ticket inspector on the trains.
So they gave you a new house?
Yes.
Pretty much.
And 2 flats next door.
Yeah. So
one house and 2 flats.
So how far did you move? Just a few hundred metres?
100 metres.
100 metres?
Yes.
So you didn't even need to learn a new address?
No.
Gosh, that's amazing, isn't it? Chris, with your dad working on the railway, did he ever sort of rope you in to help him out with anything?
Yeah, when Dad was on a late turn, I'd go around the station at 5 o'clock, 6 o'clock, 7 o'clock, getting dark. We'd go up the oil shed now and light the tilly lamps. I remember, as you say, 1966, the last train coming through. I was on the platform, packed, both platforms packed, train was packed, the very last train. I see that.
Must have been very sad.
Yeah, very sad. Yeah, very, very sad.
Now, this bit of old wall is rather fascinating. We've seen on the series so far that we've come across many of the old concrete posts that used to have wires between the posts, but this is very different. This is an actual reinforced concrete fence. And if we look back at the old photographs, you can see that these were all over the place here in Partridge Green, one of the last few remnants that's still knocking about. If you drive on the B2135 towards Partridge Green, look out for this wall. It's still visible on the east side, but the best bit is tucked just around a corner. You remember we talked about how the footbridge was T-shaped and part of it joined with the road? Well, here it is. This is a surviving part from 160 years ago. where the fence is, that would have extended out onto the footbridge where you could go that way to one platform or that way to the other. And it's beautiful that it's still here. So it's goodbye to Partridge Green. Let's head further up the Downslink towards West Grinstead. There is a road ahead, and in fact here it is. This road was here at the time of the railways, and the old cattle market would have been just over there. And of course, when we get a road intersecting with a railway line, what do we get? Level crossing gates. And unbelievably, 60 years later, these gates are just about still here. Covered in copious amounts of ivy is one of the old posts, and you can see here the hinge that would have supported the gate as it closed to keep traffic back. Now, I don't think that has swung in many years, but the gate would have come across here and latched on this post, which again, amazingly, is still in place. Of course, the Downslink is quite narrow, so it only represents one of the two lines. In fact, the Downslink path itself is the northbound line. I had to work it out there. We drive on the left, of course. So the southbound line would have actually been in line with what is now this driveway to this property called Dormers. But I'm intrigued to find out whether there's any sign of the gates on this side. Certainly on this side of the road, I don't think there is, but I'm quite alarmed by the number of times I say this, but follow me into the bushes and we'll take a look. So this would have been the southbound line taking the trains down towards Partridge Green. This could possibly be a little bit of the old post, because I can't see any other reason why it would be here. But our old trusty favourite, a concrete fence boundary marker, is still here. These, of course, followed the edge of the railway property, and they had the wire fencing. You can still just about see the last traces of a bit of old wire, a bit down here as well, look. So even though most of it has gone, this survives. I always like looking at things like hedgerows, thinking that they've probably been here for about 100 years or more, but certainly things like these majestic oaks have surely been here since the demise of the railway, because they would never be planted this close to the track. And when the tracks were removed, there were quite a few things that weren't necessarily taken away because they were too cumbersome, and they perhaps got thrown to one side. And there's a lovely example of that just down here. Because buried, or not really that buried, quite conspicuous if you know where to look, is this. Oh, blimey, they're heavy. This is one of the old Hallard markers or monument stones that we featured in an earlier episode. It's just been sort of dumped down the embankment, and you can still see on here some of the markings. That says 1 1/4. So too heavy to take away, they probably just dumped it. And another lovely clue for us, one of the old trusty railway boundary marker concrete posts, complete with wire. Now, I'm not going to go off and show you every single concrete post and culvert, but this is a particularly nice one. If you want to find it, I'll leave this stick here. But over here, this is well worth taking a look at. This is another example of where they had to navigate natural obstructions such as little streams and brooks, because you can't just build a huge embankment and neglect this watercourse. So here it is from the 1860s, another Victorian brick culvert. This one, although it's covered in ivy, is in spectacular condition. There are many nice walks around this area, and you can see here that our Downslink straddles a lovely public footpath. I wonder whether that path would have been here when the railway line was. But as I've mentioned before, it's always worth being vigilant into the verges, because I've just spotted something railway related. Let's go and take a look. And here it is. I spotted it because of the holes in the rail. This is a bit of old bullhead rail. The holes would have been used to bolt a fish plate onto the next piece along. Don't know why it's actually stuck vertically in the ground, but it's right on the boundary of the old railway line, because there again is another of our old fence posts. When the railway line closed, nature seized its opportunity to take over, and there is a rather unusual connection between plants and railways. Take, for example, buddleias. I'm always commenting how they frequent the path of a railway line. Now, why is this? Well, the seeds from plants are carried along the line in a slipstream created by the train, and the nutrition from the brake dust was very high in nitrogen, and that helped fertilise them. So it's not uncommon to see buddleias, but fruit trees like this apple tree here, why is that there? Well, let's think back to the passengers who would be travelling from Partridge Green behind me up towards West Grinstead. They would have eaten an apple, and when they finished with it, they would throw it out the window, just like that. And that, in turn, grew into this magnificent apple tree. But that is why you'll see apple and pear trees along a railway line. And here we are. This is Needs Hill Bridge that took the double-track railway line over the road. Looking at this, you might think, well, there are no obvious signs that this is Victorian railway architecture. Certainly it doesn't look 160 years old. The reason is when the railway line closed and they repurposed this to become the Downslink, they actually raised the height of the bridge and put these barriers on for safety. But if we take a look over the edge, you can still see the original brickwork, the majestic brickwork that would have been in place when this was built. Well, this marks the end of this episode of Tracing the Rails, but join us next time as we continue north to West Grinstead, where there are some real treasures to discover.
Can you spare a bob, says the railway dog, all for a noble charity called the Woking Homes, for children all alone who've lost their family. As is home you dash, thank you for the cash, dogs a lot like me, help for many years, orphans full of tears, find a new family. Sally was so sad, lost her loving dad, a train he did not see, cutting branches back, growing near the track, missed the watchman scream. Can you spare a bob, says the railway dog, all for a noble charity called the Woking Homes, for children all alone who've lost their family. When you see a dog with bright collecting box during a railway miles, could be Henry Jack collecting on his back shillings to bring back smiles. At his home you dash, thank you for the cash, dogs a lot like me. Help for many years, orphans full of tears, find a new family, find a new family.
Next time on Tracing the Rails. If you've been following our adventures and think that all we discover are the odd Hallard stone and a concrete post, then you are in for a treat as we head to West Grinstead.